I'm currently batch recording this week's episodes, and I haven't done that all the time. But it's something that's important to do to ensure that I not only be able to produce the schedule that I want to produce, the frequency of publishing episodes, but it's something that I think is important when we talk about, providing content for people in a way that you control, not that it controls you. And I think that's really important. In fact, I almost messed it up just saying that. I've allowed a lot of the times that my content schedule to control me and not me control the schedule. That's really important to prevent burnout from helping with content. But it also, I do this for a reason. And it's really, and I just, thought about it today after listening to a different podcast. And it made sense. Or this person was saying is, I want to spend time with you talking about the ocean. That's why I got into this. And I want you to think out of that same mindset when you are either thinking about doing science communication or doing science communication and having trouble getting through some of those, those roadblocks or those challenges, and be like, hey, do you want to spend time with people to talk about, what you want to talk about, science, conservation? Well, this is the way to think about it. And we're going to talk about both of those things on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. It's science communication focused. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. This is the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. And on today's episode, we're going to be focusing in on science communication, SciComm, because I love it. I love talking about this. It's the way we can speak up for the ocean. A lot of you who are listening want to either start their own SciComm thing, work within science communication in the industry, like in the field, or you have already started. And you might, start feeling that burnout. You might start feeling that, should I be doing this? Is it really worth my time? And I want you to have a couple of different mindsets. One, I want you to prevent burnout by batch recording if you can. But also, I want you to think about it in a different way of producing science communication is not just, I have to put this out there to inform everybody. It's, I want to spend time with people to get them, and when I spend time, I want to spend time with them to talk about ocean science and conservation. That's what I want to do, or whatever your message is. That's what I want you to focus on, is how you spend time with your audience. Because I think that's really bringing it back to what we want to do, is that's reach people and have discussions with them. You're just opening up the discussion by providing the content in the way you do, through social media, through podcasting, through YouTube, whatever that might be, digitally. And you want to be able to provide that to them, but you want to spend time with them, just like you would be doing one-on-one in person. But you're doing a one-to-many, right? You're the one person and you're speaking to many people at a time because you're over on social media. And that's the great part of social media. But it comes with its downfall. And something that I realized coming back from a trip where I went on vacation for 2 weeks, almost 2 weeks. It was a vacation of a lifetime. I went with my mom. I went with my brother. I went with my family, my kids, my wife. We went to Italy, as I mentioned in the last episode. And I remember, right before I went, I had this plan that I was going to continue the publishing schedule because it's really important so that you can stay informed about the ocean. But I remember almost burning out trying to produce all these episodes. It was a little crazy. And I was like, something's got to give here. Like I've got to think of a different way of doing things in the future to not only just stay ahead, but also get my time back. Because something you realize when you're on vacation is time really matters. Time with your family, time to enjoy the life you built is extremely important. And that is something that I realized on this trip when I was in Italy. We went to Rome, we went to the Amalfi Coast. When I was on the Amalfi Coast, I had, these beautiful views. Like if you've ever had the chance to go, or if you've been, you know what I'm talking about if you've been. You are sitting on these cliffs or above these cliffs, and you're looking out into the ocean, and you're seeing people living, in their apartments and in their buildings and in their homes, their country homes, and they have this spectacular view of the ocean. They wake up to this spectacular view of the ocean. And their life is slowed down, and they have a very simple life, a lot of them. There's a hustle and bustle of a regular town, but a lot of them will just sit out. And I remember seeing, some people, men and women, who are, or whatever gender, and who are sitting on a bench that's overlooking a cliff, that's overlooking the ocean, and just sitting there, having a cup of coffee and just enjoying life. Not talking to anybody, just having a few minutes, maybe an hour, to just sit and enjoy the scenery. And those are people who live there. These aren't tourists. These are people who actually live there. Another example of I was in Rome. It was a busy street, tourist street. There was a guy on a bench that was sitting beside me while I was waiting for my wife and kids to come out of a shop. And he's just sitting there. He's writing notes down, not working, just writing things, just being art. And then at one point he started drawing. He started sketching the area and the buildings and things like that, just to enjoy, the hustle and bustle of Rome and a tourist area of Rome, and just relaxing a little bit. And it just goes to show that when you go to other cultures, you just see how they enjoy life. And that is a great way to enjoy life. I have the privilege of living in Burlington, Ontario. I know it's a small town to many people. It's about, 200,000 people. So it's a pretty, small city, I would say. But we have beautiful scenes. We have wonderful parks. We have a great trail system. We have the escarpment around us, which is a great system of nature that protects us from a lot of weather and a lot of things that are going on. We have beautiful Lake Ontario and just some great scenes. We got a nice beach. We've got a beautiful lakefront, and I don't enjoy it enough. I don't enjoy that time with my dogs enough because I work full time and I do this on the side. And sometimes I'm out here, actually often, I'm out here every night after dinner working on podcasts and things like that, and kind of messing around and, doing different things like marketing the podcast and so forth. But I spend most of my time in my office. I don't spend it with the 2 dogs that I have. I don't spend it with my kids, although they're teenagers, so they have their own sort of agendas now. My wife, likes to read in the evening and so forth, but that's how I spend it. In an office, looking at 3 screens that I'm looking at right now, and sometimes podcasting for you guys. But sometimes it's last minute. Sometimes it's not the best way of spending my time, and I think that is something that, I need to change. And I thought about that, when I was in Italy, and I was like, I need to change. I need to spend more time with my dogs, with my family, enjoying the place that I live at, and exploring it a little bit more, because I just haven't explored it enough. And so that's what I'm going to be doing. And to do that, I had to think about how can I really just simplify my system of producing content. So now with 2024, I produce 3 episodes a week for the podcast, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I also produce 2 episodes on YouTube, Tuesday and Thursday. So my goal is to get the production to at least, batch record the 3 episodes in a row for the podcast, the audio podcast, and then do the 2 shows, batch record the 2 YouTube shows and edit them, because it takes a little longer to edit video, so that they're ready for the week. Whether I do it on the same day or do it 2 different days, they're ready for that week. I think that's really important. Then I have the rest of the week to market the podcast, which I can do on the run, be able to talk about the podcast, but also not sit in my office. I can do that on my phone, on a park bench somewhere if I really need to, or walking the dogs. I think that's what's important. And that's what is interesting about when we talk about getting stuck or getting sort of drawn into this social media, digital platform content making. And I think it scares a lot of people. It scares a lot of people from doing science communication. Some people don't like social media. That's fine. They write. That's fine. Every medium has its own way of sucking you in, and saying that you have the need, or you feel the need to be able to produce more. And I think that is a very interesting way of getting caught up in the whole digital platform thing. A lot of people will be like, well, you need to be on every social media platform to be able to produce content, and you need to cross promote and multi-purpose your content and things like that. It can get very confusing and very time sucking sort of situations, right? And I'll hear there's a guy out there who's a social media marketing genius, Gary Vaynerchuk. He owns a multi-hundred million company that it does advertising on social media. He has a team of people to do the social media for him. He just produces the content. He will be on Twitch, which is a streaming service, all day, and turn it on and off as he goes along, and you get to watch him all day. and he's, you get to watch his day of, producing podcasts or being guests on podcasts or producing content whenever he wants. But he has a team to like just basically cut up all the clips or, create the content and then send it out, and not everybody has a team, and I understand that. I don't have. I'm basically on my own. I don't have time to cut up clips. I don't have time to post to social media. I don't have time to promote my podcast where I can grow the podcast to where I, quote unquote, need it. That's not my purpose. My purpose is to produce content, is to grow my podcast to increase the reach, but not to a point where I have to suck in my whole entire life to keep up with people who are doing it with teams of people that do the same thing. I can't afford that, nor do I want that right now. I want to be able to produce content, put it out there, and tell people about it, right? Have those conversations and tell people about it. And I think by batch recording the content, it allows me to open up the rest of my week to do things that I like. It allows me to do coaching where I don't have to worry about doing work when I come home. It allows me to spend time with my dogs, take them out on longer walks or take them to different places and things like that instead of just around in my neighborhood. It allows me to relax a little bit, enjoy my backyard in the springs and summers, which is coming up. Hopefully one day we'll get spring, although this winter has been very, very warm, which is scary. But regardless, it allows me to enjoy my backyard. I've had a very privileged life, and I want to be able to enjoy it instead of just working on this all the time. I love working on it, right? But there's limits, and I think we all have to understand our limits. And I think that's what scares a lot of people to get into science communication is the fact is I got to keep up with all this content. I got to keep up with all this content. I don't want people to think that. I want you to think about how you can produce content where people will enjoy the content. How will it serve your community? How will it serve your future audience? That's what I want you to think about. I don't want you to think about, I got to post this amount of times. I got to post this. I got to post this. Don't think about it. There are podcasts, there are YouTube videos I post once a month and get just as many views per episode as someone like me who produces 3 times a week. There really is. And there's nothing wrong with that. You do what you can, and I want you to think about that. I don't want people to get burnt out because they get caught up in sort of the hustle of social media. In fact, a lot of the times, social media doesn't really help, with podcast, increasing their podcast audience. And then people are like, well, I got to produce, like, here's a situation that I was going to fall into, and I didn't fall into it. Produce the podcast. Take it up and repurpose the podcast to go into other, social media sites. So I can cut up into clips, like a longer episode, long form episode, like I'm doing right now. It's going to be about a 20-minute or so episode. I can cut those into clips. I can post it all over different platforms, Instagram, TikTok, and so forth. And I can video it and everything. And then that'll post, and then I can post those on different times. No problem, right? Well, that takes a lot of time to do. It takes a lot of time to pick the clips. Also, it's very difficult to pick your own clip from a solo episode. What you're like, oh man, I said this, and it's going to be really important, and this is the stuff that's going to attract people to my podcast. No, that's not what it is, right? You want to create content. You want to establish a relationship, and this is the second part of the episode that will help you understand and think differently of science communication on digital platforms, and also help you reduce burnout. Spend time with your audience talking about the thing that you love. In this case, it's ocean science and conservation. Imagine you're at a party, and at this party you get introduced as a marine biologist. And so the person you get introduced to is interested, be like, oh, they're probably going to say, oh yes, I once wanted to be a marine biologist when I was a kid, but it just never happened for whatever reason. That's fine. Then they'll start asking you questions about the ocean. Are we really in trouble? What's the biggest impact on the ocean? Is it climate change? Is it this? Are we really doing damage to it? And then you get to talk to them about the different conservation priorities, the different conservation stories, the success stories. It's not all bad. There's optimism in there, and you help give them. Okay, so that's a general conversation that people can have who are marine biologists. It's a general conversation that I've had many times, right? So other people might have different conversations depending on where they're coming from. But we all have some sort of conversation when we get introduced as a marine biologist, an opportunity to spend time with somebody one-on-one in person to talk about and answer their questions that they may or may not have if they've, and they never met a marine biologist to ask them. So they're asking you, and you could have a great conversation on that. And that's wonderful. You're doing it one-to-one. Now think about that, of spending time with that person, but doing it from a podcast medium or a YouTube video medium where you are the one person and you are speaking to many people who are watching your video over time. You got to remember, when you post a video, as long as you keep it up there, it's evergreen. It's always going to stay up there. People can find it, whether it's through search, whether it's through just looking through your channel and going through your back catalog, like your back episodes. They can find it multiple different ways, and they can, see it like 2-3 years down the road. There are some people who are like, hey man, I listened to that episode a while ago that you produced, and it was all about blue whales being discovered in Sri Lanka. And I'm like, oh yeah, I remember doing something on that, but that was a long time ago. What did I talk about? Can you just mention? I don't remember a lot of the episodes. I have over 1,500 episodes. So I don't remember every episode, but people still find my episodes and still download them and still listen to them, which is fantastic because they're evergreen. They're up there for a reason. They're there to answer questions that people may have of specific geographies or specific species or specific conservation questions, right? About the ocean. That's what the purpose is. But my goal is, and I heard this on a podcast, a new podcast actually, about social media. And this guy was on, his name's Enrico, and this guy was on it, and he was talking, it was a solo episode, and he was just like, think about long form content. That should be your strategy. And that was his strategy, was to produce more long form content, because he produces TikToks and Instagram short form videos where it's like a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes long, maybe even 10 minutes long. But it's not long form content, it's short form content. That's what's considered. But he wanted to do as new marketing, what he's telling everybody is to produce more long form content, because the benefit of long form content is you are spending time, or someone is spending time with you. They're spending time listening to you. They're spending time watching you, depending on the medium. And that allows them to build a relationship with you and you with them, but unknowingly, right? Just through your content, just through the way you speak, the way you pronounce things, your humor, your seriousness, your resourcefulness, your ability to be like, hey, I'm the resource for ocean science and conservation. Because you're spending time with me, you are subscribing to me, you are following me, you're doing all these things depending on what medium you're on, and you are listening to me and watching me a couple times a week, a couple times a month, and you're able to build that relationship with me. You come to me when you're asking a question or you want to know more about the ocean. That's what you're doing. I'm doing science communication and you're enjoying it, so you want to learn more about it and you want to watch me or you want to listen to me, again, depending on the medium. And so I was like, oh, wow. And I was in the car when I was watching this or listening to this, and I was like, wow, that makes sense, right? As a podcaster, I've heard a lot from audience members who will be like, I listen to you every time I'm in the lab and I'm doing pipetting, or I'm doing something that's like a tedious task, or it's a repetitive task, and I need to get my mind off things, and so I get inspired by you talking about ocean stuff and me listening to it. So that's what people like to hear. That's what my audience likes to hear. They spend time with me, and that is a great way to think about going forward and doing ocean science and conservation communication. Is I'm spending time with you, you're spending time with me talking about the ocean. It's exactly what I would do if I met somebody at a party or at a function, and I'm introduced as a marine biologist, and you start asking questions about the ocean. It's repeated a lot of times when I go to gatherings, and this is something I get to do proactively in case somebody has a question about a specific topic around ocean science and conservation that I've covered in 1,584 episodes, including communication itself. So having this go back and forth and this continuous cycle of producing content for people and the people spending time with me to listen to this builds that relationship. And it helps me to think about, hey, you know what? I'm not just doing a podcast to get out there to get my download numbers up. I'm doing a podcast to get out there to spend time with somebody, to explain a specific story or a specific project or what somebody's doing, to help them understand, what people are doing to help protect the ocean, or what's happening to our ocean, and how people are speaking up, or how you can speak up for that. And that's sort of what I'm doing. That is what I like to do. and I'm spending time with you in some form, and people are listening or people are watching in some form. And that's what I do. And I want you to think about it the same way. If you're thinking about doing science communication, or you're doing science communication in this kind of way, but you haven't thought about it, I think it might help. And I want you to tell me, like, do you think this will help you going forward when you talk about, science communication, or if you're going to start a show or a program, or you're going to start a series, whether it be short form or long form, even short form, you can do a lot of short form videos, quality wise, provide a resource, and just do it often enough where people are spending time with you. There's less editing involved, less thinking. It's more on what's on topic of mind, and like what's on your top of mind at that time. And you're like, okay, now I got it. Like, people can get a good information from it. But you're spending time with people. And people are, they acknowledge and they thank you either through communication. They DM you, or they get in touch with you and they say thank you. Like I would get a lot of people doing, which is so great to hear. Or they just sit and they listen passively and they're like, oh, cool. And they use that in their forethought of how they live for a better ocean, right? They may not have thought about that before. So if you're thinking about science, like starting science communication channel or program, I highly recommend that you do that you start thinking about, like, how do I spend time with people? How do I want to spend time with people and talking about the ocean? Do I want to do it in short form? Do I want to do it in long form content? What platform should I use? How should I think about it? And how to reduce burnout? Batch record. If you're going to do a show like on TikTok or something where it's going to be like a minute or 3 minutes, do batch record those, like 5 episodes for the week. Boom, they're done, and just post them, right? And then there's some of the other content you can do on TikTok or Instagram. If they're short form, you can do like off the cuff, like really quick ones. Just be like, hey, I was just thinking about this and this is nice. Or show pictures or something like that. You can do multiple times a day if you really wanted to. I would start off with just 5 times a day, or five times a day, 5 times a week, once a week, or even once a week, once a day, once a week, whatever you want to do, just do it, batch record the crap out of it, and then find out if you like it. And if you like it, continue doing it. If it works within your workflow, continue doing it. Do not get burnt out. Take breaks, enjoy life, enjoy the water, and get your blue mind on. And that's the episode. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, about burnout and batch recording, as well as, changing your mindset about spending time with people instead of just producing content. I think that's changed the way I produce content, even though I've just thought about this today, but this is my second episode that I'm batching, and I'm so happy because I've just taken, 3 days of work out of my schedule, which is wonderful. Anyway, that's it for today's episode. Let me know what you think. DM me on Instagram, How to Protect the Ocean, at How to Protect the Ocean. You can also sign up for my newsletter, speakupforblue.com/newsletter, so that you can get access to the newsletter and other news around oceans, because this is the way I like to spend time with people, is through your email as well to start off your day 5 days a week. So speakupforblue.com/newsletter. And thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.